Pelella. And Maggie, you may want to hold it because, yeah, I know.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Okay.
Is it okay if I keep it here?
Yeah, okay,
you sure?
good. Yeah, there you go. All right, whatever you want. So Maggie Rose is a major in Spanish and General Science. She traveled to Granada, Spain. And another fun fact about another one of our prior students, she was recently accepted into the Hershey Medical Program. But she's probably going to not go to the medical program because of the prior experience. And so hopefully her parents are not upset with us. But Maggie Rose actually, it's not that she has decided to change her life, but she has decided that prior has changed the way in which she looks at the world so much that she's actually wanting to take a gap year or two to continue doing more research before she actually goes to medical school or enters into the medical profession. And so we have Pyre to thank for this is a very good thing.
It definitely opened my eyes to exploration, let's put it that way.
So Maggie Rose is going to be talking to us about assessing how bilingualism affects the influences of idiomatic processing. So this project and Bridget projects were sister projects looking at different, similar questions with different speakers. So please join me in welcoming Maggie Rose Pelella.
Thank you for that introduction, Julie. So as Julie said, I'm Maggie Rose Pelella, and I'm a junior here at Penn State. And this summer, I got to travel to Granada, Spain as a prior fellow and conduct research on my project assessing how bilingualism affects and influences idiomatic processing. And my project is under the direction of Dr. Julie Ducias at Penn State and Dr. Teresa Bajo in Granada, and Dr. Julia Togata here as well. And this is one of my favorite pictures from my time there, catching the sunrise over the Alhambra. So I'm kind of going off of what Bridget said. A lot of our information goes hand in hand, but I think it's really important to have that understanding of what an idiom is, or frase hecha in Spanish. So there are these expressions where the meaning that the expression conveys is not necessarily derived from the word components. So a good example of this is to pull one's leg. So in English this means to joke around. But you can't arrive to that meaning by the individual words. And then it's also important to understand why idioms are so important to study. So I look at it as pragmatic competence and knowing how to communicate messages for a certain social context. And within pragmatic competence lies figurative competence. So knowing and understanding the meanings of these idioms. And I like to put it in terms of, the Spanish that I learned here at Penn State is a whole world different than the Spanish I was learning on the streets of Granada. And so the more time I spent there, the more time I was able to understand more of those colloquialisms that they use there. So that's critical in second language acquisition. I thought it was also important just to give a little background of some studies that describe how idioms are processed. So the first one, which a lot of you are probably familiar with, is that parasitic view of language, where when processing the L2 idioms, non-natives rely on their L1 lexicon to help them process that. Another study says that the literal translation of an idiom is carried out to try and find that L1 equivalent when processing L2 in their L2. And then some studies support that the literal translation is unnecessary because that figurative meaning is directly retrieved from your memory. So the focus of my current study, a little bit different than Bridget's, is understanding how bilinguals access the figurative and literal meanings in the L2. So my participants were all shown idioms in English, whereas Bridget's were all shown the same idioms in Spanish. And we're particularly interested in the time points at which the figurative and literal meaning are activated, and also how the congruency of idioms affects this processing. So then, of course, it's important to understand what exactly a congruent idiom is. As Bridget mentioned earlier, I think we use the same idiom, so we're really thinking on the same wavelength there. But to tighten one's belt in English is translated in Spanish to apretarse el cinturón. So not only is the meaning the same across both languages, but also the words used to describe that meaning are also the same. And then the second example I have here is an example of an incongruent, to pull one's leg. In Spanish, it is tomar el pelo. So as you can see, to grab one's hair is definitely different than pulling one's leg. So the main research question we're investigating here is, does congruency between languages modulate the time needed to access the figurative and literal meaning of an idiom in the L2 as measured by a lexical decision task? So I wanted to take you all through the typical experimental design that my participants were set up with. So we use a priming task to measure facilitation between the prime, which was the idiom, either congruent or incongruent, and the target word, which is either the figurative target, the literal, or control target. So if you're participant 1 coming into the lab, you're going to sit at the computer and you might see "to play with fire" show up on the screen. And then from there, we manipulated the ISI, which was the interval between when the prime first appeared and then the target appeared after that. So then the target would appear on the screen, and experiment 1 would have the figurative target, so jeopardize. And as the participant, you would have to make a lexical decision on that word, whether or not it's a word that exists in the English language or not. So we had 120 of these and then 120 fillers. So our results show that at 300 milliseconds, no significant changes were measured. However, at 600 milliseconds, this is where we saw the most differences. So on the left, we have the congruent idioms, and on the right, we have the incongruent. So if you direct your attention to the congruent idioms, you see that the figurative target in yellow and the literal target in green were both accessed faster in this case. And we attribute this finding to the fact that because not only the meaning is the same across the languages, but the words used to convey that meaning are the same, that the L1 gives somewhat of a boost to the participant in accessing the figurative and literal meaning. However, we see a little bit something different for the incongruent idioms here. And you see that the green target, which is the literal, was only accessed here in this case. And so, simply put, because you don't have that same boost from your L1, only the literal is going to be activated here, and we even see cause for interference with the yellow target, which is the figurative target, where we measured slower reaction times and actually more errors as well. So back to the original research question, does congruency modulate the time? And the answer is yes, at 600 milliseconds. So for congruency, figurative and literal were available at 600 milliseconds, and then for incongruent, only the literal were available. So this tells us that congruency does in fact facilitate bilingual idiomatic processing. So some future directions that we hope to take with this study are comparing a similar group of bilinguals here at Penn State to kind of compare different bilingual environments. And we hope to do so maybe through an ERP or eye tracking study, just to link these behavioral results that we collected data on in Spain to the underlying cognitive processes. And then the translational implications of this project are very important as well, because, like we said, figurative competence is so important in second language acquisition. So, as the results show, congruent and incongruent idioms are processed very differently. So what we hope to see is that teachers spend more time and place more emphasis on the teaching of the vocabulary and incongruent idioms, and exposing students to the fact that even though an idiom may convey the same meaning across languages, the words are different, so we can't always expect that the words will be the same. And that's hopefully will allow students to recognize that figurative meaning a little bit easier. And again, crucial for second language acquisition. I didn't think this presentation would be complete with a little bit about my experience in Granada. As Bridget mentioned, we got to do a really interesting outreach activity with the young children and the short story in 3 languages, and it was really cool to be a part of that, just instilling bilingualism in them at such a young age. But my experience in Granada, like I said, it came to be like home for me. I loved the food. The food was amazing. I couldn't get enough of that gelato, quite literally. I got to visit the Alhambra and really immerse myself in the culture there. We lived in the Albaicin region, which is this picture here. I got to walk down the streets of Gran Via every day. It was an incredible experience.